Welcome back. We had a good conversation with Catherine Owens a few minutes ago. We are streaming. Are we on Zoom? Are we Zooming? Is that how they're tying in? So those of you that have learned Zoom, we're Zooming. Good to have you with us. Thank you for being here. And we are streaming from Revel Eagle, which, by the way, is in Eagle, right next to Merrill Park. If you know the park with all the flags.
In the water park that my grandkids
love.
And
the little
splash pad.
That is true, and the kids love that. We're right on the river. It's a nice location. Listen, those of you that are at that point, or maybe before you're at that point, because some people don't recognize they're at the point, you should start, we'll talk about that maybe. Get out, look at some places. I would put this maybe at the tail end because there will be some expectations from a place like this, and it's lovely. It really is lovely. And just kind of get to understand what's out there as you're making those decisions. With me now is Robert Vande, who is Dutch. Okay, your family's Dutch.
Yeah, I'm half Dutch.
Yeah. He is the executive director of the Idaho Healthcare Association. In a minute, you'll explain, hopefully.
Sure.
Because there's intricacies that, I just know that's what you do.
Yep.
I'm not sure what all that entails. You've been there, you've been there since 2001?
Yep.
Holy cow. You went to school at the University of Utah. They're still winning. Yeah, I know. If they could get their quarterback back.
Yeah, that would be a big help. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I love Boise State, too. We've lived here for 30 years, so
yes,
I'm a Boise State fan, too.
We've done the same. We've adopted Boise State. I don't know if I'm going to watch another game this season, but hey. So you've been involved in, before this, you were involved you've been in the business.
Yes, sir.
For a long time, and you have a background educationally that lends itself to this. So the title, you saw the title, is along the lines of, oh my gosh, what's this going to cost? And the reason we put that in there is because so many people get to this part in their life, and all of a sudden they have to deal with, oh, I didn't realize that it cost money. Okay, yeah, it costs money. They know that. But they're not sure how much.
My favorite joke is they call it the golden years because it costs a lot of gold to turn older and have needs. It's expensive.
Yeah, and this afternoon we're going to have a conversation about gravity. And what that does to the body after a certain age as we start to, the systems age a little bit. And so we're going to need a little help. So I thought it would be great to kind of have a conversation of, well, here's the range of options, and let's talk about the range of cost, because that's a pretty wide range.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, if I were to ask you and your attendees, what does transportation cost?
Oh, geez, that's
wide open. I bought a car 15 years ago. I'm still driving it, and it was $25,000. So it's been paid off for 10 years. But every month I have maintenance costs, I've got gas, I've got insurance, so it's probably $500 a month. Other people, the cost of a new car today is not $25,000. I'm dreading that, but I have to go shopping pretty soon before this one dies. But some people, transportation is free. It doesn't cost anything. Others have a bus pass, and so it's $100 a month. Others are spending thousands of dollars in transportation, but it totally depends on what their needs, their preferences are, and that's just as wide, or I would think long-term care and your healthcare needs is even a bigger disparity
I would think.
than what does transportation cost.
Yeah. So maybe we could start with a definition of, we throw the term long-term care, it just bounces around like this, and I find that many people really don't know what that means. Can you
start us there. What is long-term care?
I'll give you my definition.
Okay.
There are many definitions. It depends on what kind of providers you include. I think the broader definition is the one I preferred, is any setting or assistance that provides care or assistance in the long term. Long-term care, it's pretty simple. But that could be for people with disabilities, that it's for life, need some kind of assistance. It could be for those that are just becoming older and need some kind of assistance. For example, our association, we represent skilled nursing facilities, which is nursing homes, assisted living facilities, home health agencies, home care agencies, and home health Medicare pays for a short-term nursing or rehabilitation stay, IVs, whatever you need, Medicare pays for that. Medicare generally doesn't pay for long-term care. So home care is non-medical. It's not IVs, it's bathing and toileting and maybe assistance with some medications. That's a home care agency. Pretty confusing, but we represent those agencies as well. And we also represent intermediate care facilities for the intellectually disabled. So those with a developmental disability that for life will need some kind of assistance, either from unpaid home family caregivers to actual 24-hour care in a licensed facility. So it's very broad, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's one more, and your association does not represent these people. In fact, they're generally not represented, and that is the unpaid caregivers, which can be a spouse, a parent, a sibling, the kids, neighbors. These are all, so the range is, I think, really broad.
And that's 95% or whatever the exact number is of long-term care, is people making it at home. I admitted a resident when I was running an assisted living in Boise who was blind and deaf, lived in a small town of Prairie, Idaho, which is a really small town.
Been there.
There's like a dozen homes,
Yeah.
and then spread out. And his neighbors helped him stay in his home for decades.
Oh my.
Blind and deaf and now older, couldn't get around. And his neighbors were so kind. A neighbor finally drove him to the facility and said, "We just can't do it anymore. It's not twice a day, it's twice an hour or hours and hours." And he was the sweetest man. And he could barely hear and barely see, but his unpaid caregivers, and it wasn't even family, it was neighbors, really provided care for decades until he finally, the thing fell apart. And he came and he's very happy, and we provided the 24-hour care that he really needed to stay safe.
I question that I ask as we kind of examine some of that is, yeah, my kids are going to step in, and I would ask, do they know that?
Yeah,
Have you had that conversation with them? And do you know how many
Yeah.
times they had?
Yeah, right.
Very few.
Yeah.
Yeah. The kids look at me and they're like, "Oh, okay, didn't know that."
I think I learned that from you. I've told a lot of groups that I meet with, they should have a financial plan, of course, which many younger than boomers don't have a financial retirement plan, but they should also have a care plan. Who can provide assistance? Who lives nearby? If it's not son or daughter, is it family, friends, other
Right.
people? What is your care plan? And luckily, this delightful older gentleman that was deaf and blind held it together. What we see in the skilled nursing is so often they don't make a decision until something catastrophic happens where that's your only option.
Yeah.
All the other options are gone now. Home care 2 times a day is not going to help someone who's had a fractured hip, can't get out of bed at all. That's a nursing home stay now. And your options are over.
Yeah.
So I really encourage people, like you said at the beginning, if you're listening now for yourself or your parents, it's time to start shopping now. You don't have to sign anything, but you should be aware of what the options are before there are no options.
Well, so let's go back. So we've got the unpaid. Bless you. Bless you, unpaid people.
Yeah.
There are some conversations to have, even if you're providing that care. Typically, at least my experience, it's the oldest daughter or the daughter that lives here. I've seen the daughter-in-law and they've given up their paid profession.
Which could be a challenge in a marriage because I love my mother-in-law, but it's not my mother.
Yeah.
And I was telling my sister, yeah, I know you're the oldest daughter. She said, I'm the only daughter. So and she lives 5 miles away from my mom, so she's the one to visit her and make the tough decisions.
And you call her and thank her every time.
Yep.
Yes, yeah, I understand that one too. So let's talk about maybe the range, starting with the I know they hate the term non-skilled, but the home care.
Sure.
Let's look at some costs, and then we can come back and maybe have a conversation about, well, is there some things that we can do to manage those costs?
Yeah. There used to be a nursing home in Haley, Idaho, and it was county-based. The counties subsidized it every year by hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it was mostly Medicaid because those with real funds in Sun Valley don't need a facility. They pay someone, an RN, 24/7 to come live in my home and that's $30,000 a month.
Yes.
So the nursing home private pay idea, even assisted living, doesn't work in Haley because they're like, I'm not going to facility.
No.
But that's really expensive, and they didn't care. They're like, I'll find a nurse or an aide and a nurse twice a day, and so even home care is widely disparate. It depends on what you need. The average is maybe, $200 a day, but that is still some people that need home care. In fact, when I was running an assisted living, a resident was really failing. We said, look, she's falling. This is our property. It's not good care to have falls. We're not in the room every day. It's assisted living. It's not full care. It's time to find a new place. And they're like, oh, my mom, this is her home. I don't want to have her move 2 months before we all know she's going downhill. And I said, well, it's our property and it's not good care. I don't want to be part of bad care. So we really need to have a home care agency. I don't have staff to be around the clock. If you will pay for a home care agency to come in and sit with your mom, every waking hour, we'll check on her during the night. And that was $10,000 a month.
Yeah.
To have a body that's trained and knows what to do to sit there with her. And they paid it. They're like, I don't want to move my mom as she's going downhill. And they had the funds, and they prioritized staying in her home, and everyone was better. But those that don't have those kind of resources, it's a nursing home.
So what does averages for home care? What's an hourly rate that you're looking at? And then generally, most of them they're going to have to be there a couple hours. They don't want to come for 40 minutes. They want to be there a couple hours. So what are we looking at?
I bet that's a range too.
Yeah.
Boise's probably different than Homedale, which is probably different from Burley, which is definitely different from Coeur d'Alene, that's right on the border of a state that has a $23 an hour or whatever the number is right now, minimum wage.
Oh.
And so you have to compete with your surrounding areas, and I bet that number has changed a lot in just the last 2 years.
Yes.
With wage inflation.
Yeah.
Everyone would like to hire a neighbor and say, hey, I'll pay you $25 an hour to just come check on mom. If there were enough good neighbors, then you can avoid an agency and pay them $25 an hour directly. There's not enough people to do that. And so you eventually... Many have to hire an agency that have the expert, people with training and have passed the background check.
So if I can interrupt.
Sure.
Because when the home health, I always talk skilled and non-skilled.
Yeah, so non-skilled home care.
And the home care doesn't like the non-skilled. Non-skilled. Because there's a lot of work that still goes into their training.
For sure.
Just so you know this, right? That there's training, there are things, they go through a background check, they do all these things.
There's a nurse involved.
Yes.
Care plans.
So when they say unskilled or non-skilled, it's not quite what you're thinking. There's still quite a bit involved.
Yeah, to Medicare, a skilled home health means a therapist and an RN involved in every visit.
Everything, yeah.
or supervising every
Which
visit.
of course means it costs
Yes.
a bit more
Yes, and-
than home care.
Yeah. But a home care agency that pays their staff, I'm going to guess $20 an hour, they have to pay insurance and their workers' comp. So it ends up, the agency ends up paying $30 an hour plus their markup, whatever, $35 an hour. So I'm not sure what that number is right now, but it's not $25 an hour.
And it's not $18 or $19
No, it can't
that
be.
you were thinking long ago.
Yeah, so it might be $50 an hour. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but it's not cheap and it adds up in a hurry. And I know that there are some families that decide to cobble together enough care that they're paying as much as a skilled nursing home would cost.
Yeah.
But they're at home,
Yeah.
and it might cost more. I mean, that resident that got 24-hour supervision, they were paying the home care agency $10,000. They were only paying us $4,000. So they were paying way more to that one person, but she stayed safe the rest of her life. So it varies. It depends on how many hours a day. That's the biggest factor. And then some agencies that really only hire the best are going to be closer to $50 an hour, I'm going to guess.
Okay, so let me see if I can set this up a little bit. Hopefully we're having these conversations. I always talk about mom because, I don't know, we just die. We just go, and our wives and the women folk they're here a little longer than we are. But so I say mom, and I have personal experience with that. But hopefully we're having the conversation and we're saying, okay, we see this is coming, and hopefully mom has that conversation with you. Are there things that we can do to maybe extend the time at home and avoid big costs? And so home care, and like I said, I think most of them, it's usually a 2-hour gig when they come. And what do they provide in the 2 hours? What are the things?
It depends on what the needs of the resident are. Maybe it's in the morning, help get them dressed out of bed, and the afternoon come back for a bath and make sure they've eaten something. So it just depends. Maybe take them shopping. It depends on what they need. Or it could be everything they need: bathing, dressing, eating, all those, shopping. So it depends on what they need.
Yes. So sitting down, understanding the needs. This is often a difficult conversation, but you gotta drill in, and you have to be clear what we need to do. Is it 3 days a week, 2 hours a day? Is it 4 days a week? Is it 5 days a week? Is it 4 hours a day? These are things you have to figure out.
And I can tell you, generally, families say, I think she can manage with just 2 hours a day.
Yeah.
And generally the agency is like, look, this is our business. We assess it differently. We want to provide good care, not shoestring care.
Yeah.
So our assessment says 4 hours a day. And I'm not going to do less than 4 hours because it's our name. And if it's a bad outcome, we don't want to be part of bad outcomes. And
Yeah.
so that's generally the discussion is, oh no, she's continent. Well, actually,
Yeah.
we've seen otherwise, so
Yeah.
it's going to take some more hours. But that's a dialogue.
Yes.
And you can have a dialogue. Quite often I've heard that after an ER trip because of a fall or some, wandering through the neighborhood with the UTI or something, the physician says she can't go home. I need to make sure she's going to a safe place. So show me that you have a plan with care. She can't go home alone or with a failing spouse. And it's really better to have a plan before, oh my gosh, but they're discharging her in 2 hours.
On a Friday afternoon.
Happens every Friday. And I got 2 hours to make a plan.
Yeah.
And your options become way more limited.
Yeah.
And whichever agency can actually show up to do an assessment, they'll have the work. Or if no one can, then your options are in a nursing home again because they have a van that can come pick her up in 2 hours. So all those discussions.
And you've just irritated the behoofles out of a family.
Yeah.
Who they knew.
Yep.
We know what's going on. As it
Yep.
turns out, maybe not.
Yeah.
So that's a tough situation.
And residents with dementia really have an innate ability to fake it. It's just innate. Oh no, I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
And sometimes family members see her as mom. Oh yeah, she's just quirky, but she's fine.
Yeah.
And then when all those family supports disappear and it's just her, the caregivers really realize, oh my gosh,
No.
it's way more advanced.
Yeah.
She was streaking down the hallway last
Yes.
night. Oh no, my mother would never do that.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
No.
this is what we found, and I need all these supports to make sure that doesn't happen, that she's safe. You know, the other thing, I have known 5 or 6 people that started their own assisted living because their mother needed care. And I'm going to pay myself. And it's like, oh boy, that's way more work than you realize. But there are families that actually start a certified family home. It's going to be my home.
Yeah.
She qualifies for Medicaid. I'm going to get Medicaid to pay for the care, and I'll provide the care, and Medicaid will pay me to provide the care. That's an option too.
It is.
There's a lot of
talk
hurdles.
to me.
There's a
talk
lot
to
of
me
hurdles.
before you do that.
Absolutely.
Let's have that conversation,
Yes.
okay? Because there's a lot involved.
Yeah, they got to qualify for Medicaid is
Yes.
the first issue.
Yeah.
And then there's some licensing things.
Yep.
The state has to come out and inspect, and that's not a 2-hour discussion either. But I've known lots of families, especially with an adult child with disabilities that they're caring for life, that ends up being a good option.
And that makes sense for them. Mom and dad, it's more.
It's an uphill battle to do
Yeah,
that, for sure.
it
But
is.
I've seen people successfully do that.
So to get there, though, I have this joke. It goes like, the denial is strong with this one. And that is so hard for a family to face it and
sure.
to be brutally honest
Yep.
about it. And that's why the third party is a little easier, because they don't know. And the masking doesn't work as well with them. And they're not remembering back to where mom was strong. And we all have our little idiosyncrasies. I get that.
Yep. And just not everyone even qualifies for home care. Even if you want to, many home care agencies will know, look, this is beyond what we can do. We have liability insurance too. Our insurance would never allow us to provide
Yes.
care to this
No.
person who is not going to be safe.
Yeah.
And so there's limits that will be imposed upon you, but there's lots of ranges and lots of possibilities. They all just cost money.
And require that conversation, that really drill in conversation, and put aside some prejudices and maybe
Yep.
some denial to have that conversation.
You know, I've heard family members say, oh my gosh, after a month of being in the facility, I can be daughter again. Because I just want to be
Yes.
daughter. Being 24-hour caregiver made me not so fun of a daughter.
Yeah.
And I just want to be daughter or son or brother or parent. But when you're trying to be the caregiver, it can be so overwhelming for the caregiver that the relationship doesn't feel so much like loving daughter anymore. And that's really painful
Yeah.
for everyone involved.
That is. Okay, so that's home care, unpaid, paid. A mix may be a little bit. I mean, if you have a home care company in there providing companionship, family can do that. They can come watch.
Yeah.
For mom, it was NCIS.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a theory that there's an episode of NCIS that plays somewhere 24 hours a day.
Sure, that's certainly
She
the case.
loved that one. Anyhow.
Yeah, we tried home care for my mom when every time she forgot to drink enough or eat enough, she would get confused and it would go south.
Yeah.
Or she forgot to take her medications. And so my sister was over there almost every day, and it became too much for her. So we tried home health or home care. And the agency would go over and they had a strict list of things to do. And my mom would say, oh no, I've already done that. Let's just go out for ice cream. And the agency's like, well, she's the client. How do I tell her no? Prove to me you've done these things.
No.
So they would go eat ice cream. And they're trying to just meet her needs. And then my sister would show up the next day and see that none of those things really happened. And she finally said, okay, we need assisted living to make sure those things happen, because it's going to be a really bad scenario one day. And she didn't want to go to assisted living, but after just a month, she's like, I like it here so much. But I'm eating so well. Yes. I'm so mad I have to buy larger pants. That was her biggest complaint. She gained weight. And we're thrilled
Finally
that you're not losing weight, because it was very dangerous for an older people not eating or drinking enough, all kinds of bad things. So she's thrilled in assisted living, but that's not cheap either.
No, but before we get there,
okay,
let's talk about home health.
Yeah.
And so that is qualitatively different from home care.
Correct.
This is the skilled from a medical definition. These are people, nurses, therapists that can come into the home, and this costs a bit more.
I don't know how often it is private pay. I think almost always it's Medicare pays.
Got it.
And Medicare pays 100% up until there's a copay required. You might know that better than I do.
The donut?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not free after Medicare pays for a short-term stay, but it's generally, Medicare says we don't pay for long-term care, and the general population, even Medicare beneficiaries, don't understand that. Medicare pays for short-term, like a doctor's office, a hospital stay, or a short-term acute, meaning therapists, nurses, care in a home. My personal insurance probably pays for a home health visit.
Yes.
They probably don't pay for a nursing home visit, because I'm not, but Medicare would.
Yeah.
But that's, again, short-term, skilled, meaning a therapist or a nurse, IV treatments, and many people go straight home with home health and avoid a nursing home altogether. But you've got to do that in the right order before your options are over. So I'm not sure the cost of home health is borne that much by the public, unless you're in the donut and you need longer.
But that's short term still.
Yeah,
as
it's
well.
still short term.
Yeah.
Yep.
The
or if you're in Sun Valley and you're like, I will pay for a nurse.
Oh well, I've had a couple of clients that did that as well, and I was like, okay, I was not prepared for them paying that much per month to do that. Yep. It was interesting.
Anything's possible. Anything's, but everything costs money, and the more hours you have a nurse, licensed nurses are extremely expensive right now. They're in demand. There's a bidding war for every RN, even LPNs. So that if you need a nurse involved in the care, it's expensive.
Yeah. So then what we want to do, to the extent that that's available, which it generally is we want to qualify for the Medicare. But that means, we talked about this just a minute ago, having maybe a plan before mom even goes in. She has a fall, she has a health event, a medical event, and then hospitals are under a lot of pressure to get them through that system and out sooner rather than later.
For sure.
And so either get them home to a safe place, the home health or the home health can be available, but what do we need to do? What are the...
This might be off topic a little bit, but it depends on which Medicare plan you chose. If it's straight Medicare, then they say we'll pay for a certain number of days, whatever the need is. If you chose a Medicare Advantage plan, like United or ARP's plan, and half of Idahoans choose a plan, comes with, free eyeglasses, a free gym membership, whatever other the bennies that they get to offer that, they're generally managing the care, and they will check in on that resident or that client every 2 days with the home health agency.
Oh, very good.
Prove to me that they still need your services.
Yeah.
And so they have to show a care plan every week. Here's how much she walked this week, and they will cut off services in days, like 7 days, 14 days. And
That's
so
how they manage costs.
Yeah, that's exactly how. And so I think a Medicare Advantage plan is really the best option if you're healthy. And you can you can switch back to straight Medicare when the wheels start falling off within a certain window, not just when you're in the hospital. But yeah, as you get older and have more health needs, I'm not a financial planner. I don't represent any company, so I can't give legal or Medicare advice. But those Medicare Advantage plans can be difficult to get care, what she actually needs, as opposed to straight Medicare.
Got it.
That's my advice.
So you're not there. But we have to make that decision about age 65.
Yep.
And so that's something that needs to be done back here, maybe reviewed on an ongoing basis. And those things can get just complicated enough that even the attorney sitting there going, I don't even know what this means.
Yeah.
What does this mean?
Medicare Part D plan. I got to pick one of those. That's beyond you and I too.
Yeah.
But all those things you need to pay attention to. Everyone on Medicare needs to pay attention to.
So kids, for mom and dad, that's a great conversation. Well, let me look at your Medicare plan and who's your Medicare person, and let's review this. And if you are on Medicare, that's another great conversation to have. Who's helping you? What can they tell you? And make sure that you have that in place, and maybe walk through the scenario. If I fall and I break a hip,
Yep.
help me? How does this track through? I want to know what I need to have in place. I think I'd prefer to come home. That's not always available, but but we don't have to exclude that right now. So that all we should have a plan.
Yeah. And Medicaid even does pay for skilled home health. Mm-hmm. But the rate is so low that very many agencies, same with home care actually.
Yeah.
Home care does have a Medicaid payment, but the rate is so different than what private pay rate is that many agencies will say, we don't take any more Medicaid. So finding care is going to be a challenge for both home health and home care.
Yeah, and I keep having that conversation. We're trying not to do any Medicaid at all. So that's an opening now to jump to the next, in my thinking, is assisted living, which comes to play when the amount of home care, I think, is at least that's one indication, becomes so much that it now makes sense to look at 24-hour care.
Yeah. To back you up, there is one step even before assisted living is independent living, like
true.
Ravel.
Yes.
Is, okay, there's occasional problems. We can pay for a home care agency to come in and check on mom at independent living.
Yeah.
And that's not assisted living. There's not a license required for this property. So it's much less expensive, but it depends on the room size.
Yeah.
A 2-bedroom here, I don't know what that cost is. I bet it's $3,000 a month.
Yeah, it's you have to prepare.
Yes.
And that's the upshot of the whole thing.
And once you need continual care, Ravel will say, I can't let you live here.
No.
You're falling. It's not.
And it's not because they're bad people.
No, you've just missed that boat.
Yeah.
So there's independent living, and sometimes there's a campus with independent living and assisted living.
That's what my mom did, and that's one of the reasons she moved there, is because she thought, I won't have to move.
Yeah.
And the answer was, no, she didn't.
Yeah. You might have to move down the hall.
She did eventually.
Yeah, but not actually a whole different property, a whole different caregivers. So that's something to look at as well.
Okay, so assisted living, like you said, we can become the kids again and go visit rather than argue about care and whether or not they did this or whether or not they had enough to eat or, we avoided that quite a bit. So that was, I loved that. Mom made that decision. She didn't want her boys wiping her behind. And so she says, no, this is what I'm going to do.
That's way more rare than it is common.
I know.
In my experience.
I know.
Yeah.
but we were very grateful.
It's very wise.
In Idaho, in the valley, what's assisted living? What is that looking like as far as cost?
You know, it depends what the resident needs. If my mom went to assisted living, she really needed independent living. She wasn't taking any important medications, but she would forget to eat and drink. And in independent living, they're not checking on her to make sure she drinks. They'll make sure she shows up at the dining room once a day, and whether she eats or not, that's up to her. So my mom just needed a little bit more care, and so she went to assisted living. It was $4,000 a month.
Okay.
And she needed no care, basically. But they fed her 3 times a day. They made sure she ate what was on the plate.
Yeah, eyes on.
Yeah, didn't take hardly any medications. So my sister managed her medications, and but it was clear that she wasn't taking them, or she would forget, or whatever was happening. So we finally turned that over to the assisted living. Now it's $5,000 a month.
Got it.
Just because they're managing the care. And now she's suffering from some incontinence. It's going to be $5,500 pretty soon.
Yeah.
Now, not every facility is $5,500. This is a beautiful facility in another state. But I would guess the average is $3,000 to $4,000 for those who are pretty healthy.
Okay.
You can't find caregivers 24/7 for
that.
For less than
No.
that.
No.
Now, Medicaid pays less than that, so many facilities say, we don't provide Medicaid because we can't even cover our costs. And we can't afford the best caregivers, so we just don't do that. So Medicaid is a challenge in assisted living too.
Yeah. A thought on that is, I can absolutely, as an attorney, there is some planning that I can do to help people qualify for Medicaid. And some come and ask me. And my first conversation, the very first caveat for them is, you don't want to be on Medicaid.
Yeah, I totally agree. Your options
just don't.
decrease.
Yeah.
So that's not, shouldn't be a goal for anyone. If it happens, if it's the smart thing to do, if you've planned far enough ahead, then it can be a good option. But generally, it's not going to lead to good care.
No, and so I pound the table and say, okay, if we do this, then here's what you have to keep in mind is that any money that we might save, we need to go back to the community and see if we can make a family contribution and help them afford to have your mom or dad there. But that's a conversation with the community.
Yep.
What does that look like?
And Idaho is one of the few states that allows facilities to charge something more for the room size. So they can't charge for the care if the person's on Medicaid. You either accept Medicaid or you don't. And if you've accepted that patient on Medicaid, but you say, hey, we require people to share a room, for example.
Yes.
And we don't have another resident that is able to share a room right now. So that means a private room, and we're not going to accept that patient unless the family can pass the hat every month and come up with $1,000 a month. And if they can, $1,000 is a lot cheaper than $4,000, but it's not mom's money anymore, it's your money.
Yeah.
And that happens every day. Not every family has that, but that is allowed in Idaho.
That takes planning as well.
Absolutely.
That's my point.
Yep. And it's not 3 weeks before the facility.
No.
Let's give our kids the money.
No.
That is against the law and certainly doesn't work.
That won't work.
Nope.
And you need to have a very pointed conversation with the community.
Yeah.
And make sure that they're on board with that.
For sure.
And many are.
And both ways, good communication beforehand. You don't want to learn of, we need to pass the hat and come up with $1,000 every month after admission. That is not good communication. And sometimes the facility's fault. Sometimes it's the families that didn't understand the words that were spoken to them. But that's critical to have time enough to really evaluate those discussions. In fact, when I was an assisted living administrator, I had to be very blunt with families to say, we don't even have a Medicaid agreement. So if she runs out of money before she runs out of life, I'm going to have to discharge her, and that doesn't feel good. So I've got to really have a frank conversation with you. It costs $3,500 a month here, and it will cost more as her needs. How much money do you have in the bank? How much money does she have? Because if you have care for 6 months, the money for 6 months, but we all think she's going to live longer than 6 months. This is probably not the place for you.
I think we have a question that someone has asked, and again, you can send us a question. That's the Q&A button down in the right, down there. You'll see it, Q&A. And they wanted to know, is that $3,000 to $4,000 per person? But what if you have a couple living together, and maybe he doesn't need cares, or she doesn't need cares, but he does?
Yeah, it depends on the facility, but generally it would be $3,000 for the room, and then there's a care fee on top of that. So let's say it's $3,000 for 3 meals and the room, and all the staff associated with that. But then each person that lives there also has a care rate. And my mother had 0 care rate. It was $4,000 for the basic care, but as soon as she needed more help, then it was $1,000 more. And so if the husband doesn't need any more care, maybe there's no added fee, or maybe they charge $300 just for the meals.
Yeah.
But it's different in every facility, so I can't give you an answer. But generally, it'd be an additional fee for each person depending on their needs.
Got it.
And sometimes the care need is as much as the room.
Yes.
Because bricks and mortar don't take care of
Yeah.
patients.
No.
It's staff that take care of patients. And that's by far the biggest expense for any provider is our more than the real estate, more than bricks and mortar, it's 24-hour care.
Yeah, and it's
that
not
costs.
and it's not getting cheaper.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's just going to get more expensive.
So going back to, these are conversations to have. Well, there's is it the old Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago? It's the same thing here.
Second best time is
Is
now.
now.
But that's really a far distant second.
So, the kids that are listening in, 2 things. I'm sorry, you get the burden twice. Working with mom and dad now to have those conversations, to do the shopping, right? Go shop. Go look at these places. See what they look like. See the activities that they have, if they have activities. You know what's going on. And 2. Good time now for you to start figuring out how to pay for this stuff. Because what I keep hearing you say is it ain't cheap.
No, it's not. Just getting old isn't cheap. But and transportation isn't cheap. But to really have a plan, you can trim your expenses if you plan ahead.
Yeah.
If you wait till the last minute, it will be way more expensive.
Yes. What he said. I'm just telling you what he said. Okay, so there's a 3rd level. Again, probably a lot of Medicare involved, but that would be skilled nursing.
Yep, a nursing home is what people would think of, but skilled nursing facility is the technical word. And they really specialize in short-term rehab, therapists, nurses, IVs, and we hope to get the patient home after hospitalization. But if that's not safe or possible, then some stay for long-term in a skilled nursing facility. That still need a nurse, maybe not 24/7, but sometimes during the day, nurse needs to come give that insulin injection or whatever, and that's $10,000 a month now, plus your actual needs. So almost all residents of a nursing home will turn to Medicaid if they live long enough, because who has $10,000 a month for very long?
Yeah.
And so it's that's the most expensive setting, but a nurse in Sun Valley, 24, is even more.
Yeah, and people do that. Yeah. So this afternoon, I'll be visiting with a financial advisor, and we're gonna kick around some thoughts, some concepts. But again, 20 years ago was optimal. Now, though, is still better than any time after now.
Yeah, better than Friday afternoon when you have 2 hours.
Oh my goodness gracious! And then there's really nothing you can do.
Well, and then the nursing home tends to be the only agency that has the staff and the infrastructure to say, yes, we can accept a patient in 2 hours. They'll send a nurse over, do an evaluation, send the van over, poof, she's in a nursing home. It's like, okay, maybe we could have avoided the nursing home had we had a plan and really know what the options are. The general public doesn't even understand the difference between assisted living and nursing home. The paramedics that come to our facilities to help, they don't understand the difference. Legislators don't understand the difference. So that's key to understand what we just talked about, what the differences are. And some people don't even understand the difference between Medicaid and Medicare. Drastic difference. I just really commend your audience for really trying to learn.
Tying in and beginning or moving along the educational process. The story on Medicare and Medicaid is like within a 6-week period, President Johnson signed both of those bills, and why they decided to name them what they did, which, of course, does not help.
No, it adds to the confusion.
Helping people to understand what to do. Okay, so we've touched on some things. I've got a nurse in this afternoon. I've got Teresa Halderman, and I've got Dee Childers coming in. We're going to be talking about plans from that side.
Great.
Things that we can be doing to counteract the effects of age and gravity, as Teresa says. And, I don't know what we do without gravity, but I guess as we get older, bone density and stuff like that changes. Is there some education that you can recommend for us as we go through this process? Are there some things that you can give us, or just some concepts of how to maybe prepare ourselves, emotionally, get some education? What do you think?
The agency that Dee Childers helped found, there are dozens of those now. It's fairly new, but there's dozens in the Treasure Valley that you can pay to help an outsider view really assess what's going on with mom and what are the options. It's hard to become an expert in a couple weeks.
Oh, geez.
It's so healthcare is so complex. So I wouldn't be opposed to paying someone whatever the fee is just for, hey, come help us evaluate what mom's needs really are and what the options are. People call me all the time and say, hey, this is what's happening. If it takes a lot of time, I'll refer them to someone like that. Or if you just need to know, hey, is this more likely a nursing home patient or assisted living resident? And I can give you a list of good facilities in that area. Happy to do that.
Do you recommend that they make some appointments and go visit, go just be in there? My experience has been there are plenty of facilities and folks there that will welcome you, give you a tour, help explain what they do. Now, maybe as a caveat, they're selling their place.
Of course. Yep.
So I would recommend maybe more than one. Is that a good idea?
Absolutely. And I would go in on a Sunday afternoon as well when the marketing people aren't there and just wander around. Someone asks you, can I help you? Oh yeah, we're just looking at facilities and I thought I'd look around, take a deep breath, smell, look at the residents. Do they look happy?
How are they doing?
Look at the staff. Do they look like someone you'd want to care for your mother? And then visit with the residents and the marketing person and try to get a good idea of what they're good at and see if it meets their needs. Ideally, if you have a vacation plan, you could visit with a facility and say, can we place mom here for a month?
Yeah.
Let's try it for a month. It's called respite care. But unfortunately, the regulations require so much assessment and paperwork for a new admission. There's very few facilities that will say,
we can do that.
It doesn't pencil for us for a month.
Yeah.
But if you can convince them, hey, I'm really thinking about a long-term placement here. I just want to try it. I think many facilities would say, okay, let's try it for a month. If you're really serious about it might be a long-term placement, I'll take that risk and lose money for a month.
Yeah. So with mom, we live up here. She's down in Utah. We saw a place that she caught her eye. We were trying to move that decision making along. it had independent living and assisted living, and actually had memory care in there as well. And so I think it was easier for them. They had an apartment. I said, Mom, let's get it for a week. We'll be down. We're going to be in the area for a week. We'll go do these things.
And she moved into independent living first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they said, yeah, come. We'd be glad to. So we bought a week. And
that's probably much easier than buying a week in assisted living.
I know. It's what I was
because
thinking.
There's no regulation, at
Yeah.
least in Idaho. There's no required assessment. They're wise to do that to make sure they know who's moving in. But the costs are much less for a non-regulated facility.
Yeah.
But you should really do your due diligence because it's non-regulated.
Yes, and part of that for us was, an in-depth visit, and my mother, sweet soul. People talk to me. She passed away a year ago in July, and so I still hear people, it's so sad, and she was not the best cook. That was not her thing. It was not. And so one of the things over the course of the week was for her to eat there. And she was very pleased with what they had, the menu, and how it tasted. And you know what? The other part she loved is that she didn't have to go buy the groceries. She didn't have to fix the groceries. She didn't have to put everything away when she was done. And so she was thrilled. So I could see, and I know we did this with the in-laws. We went to a number of places and sat down and had lunch.
Yeah, for sure. They'll provide meals is way easier than actual move-in.
Yeah.
They'll invite you to come share a meal anytime.
And that's a way to sit down with people, have the conversation, and get a feel for how they are enjoying the place or not. So those are things that I can recommend. Anything else that people, will be talking finances a little bit, other than the finances, what else should, and what Dee does, I think that any time you can get, the facilities have to be financially sound, and I get that.
To continue operating, absolutely.
Yeah. And to provide good care, we understand that. So they might sell you a little bit on their particular facility. So I can appreciate that, but I still think you should go visit.
Absolutely, 100%.
What else should people be doing?
To the person's question about what if Dad wants to live with her, if it's a licensed assisted living, you can't live in assisted living unless a doctor says she or he needs care.
Got it.
So Dad could live in independent living and go visit her in assisted living. And the same is true if they both need assisted living, and there's a definition of how many ADLs do you need assistance with to meet that definition.
Okay, so what's an ADL?
Activities of daily living, so bathing, dressing, eating, meds, those basic kind of functions. I think you need at least 12 points on this scale to even qualify for assisted living. About a third of assisted livings actually have a memory care option.
Oh, okay.
And so they have a secure unit that is going to prevent people from wandering down the street or into the ditch, and it's just critical that they're secured. The state is really required that anyone that lives in that facility really needs it. They can't have a husband there that knows the code and comes in and out at will, but wants to live with spouse. Nope, he needs to live on the other side of this door, and he can't have the code, which is really disturbing to families, and I get it.
Oh, that's tough.
But they can't live in the same room. The state has drawn that line. If they're in a licensed facility, if he has the code, or you're either memory care or you're not. And I wish there was more flexibility, but so many deaths have happened in the last 4 or 5 years of a resident that shouldn't have been outside the facility and was, that's a bright line to the state now.
Got it.
Now, independent living still need to not be wandering, but it's not regulated. So if you have enough patchwork caregivers together, you want mom to be safe, but there's no regulation. You could live anywhere you want in independent living and have home care come in and provide the assistance.
And I strong recommend, I can talk, I really can, I promise. It's something I do. A strong recommendation is families go visit. That is, I mean, you can hire that. You can have home care come in and provide some companionship. That's great. But families, get the kids, the grandkids, go visit. One thing that was just absolutely sweet with my mom was old friends, neighbors, that if they were driving through, they'd stop in. These are wonderful things that you can do to make wherever they are a better place. And very, very few that don't appreciate that.
And just like a car, there's a cheap used car and there's a quality new car. Assisted living and nursing homes are pretty much the same. There are really good ones that have more private pay. There's a few that don't take Medicaid at all.
Yeah.
That are only private pay, and they are they're trying to be the best. They have issues too, like everyone does with human mistakes. But if you don't have the funds for that private pay that doesn't even take Medicaid, then your options are more limited. So go visit those before it's too late while you still have those options, for sure.
So a strong recommendation is still homework. Do the homework. And again, for those that are on today thinking about mom and dad, a great thing to do is start the homework, do the research, and then it'll apply to you. Yes, you're going to get there. We're going to talk about that next when we're done here. We've got people that are going to help us in a rather strong way, very pointedly, help us to understand we're going to be there. So,
our grandparents passed away in their sleep.
Yeah.
And that's just doesn't happen as often anymore. It's a long decline where more care is needed every day until something catastrophic happens, and that's just much more likely. So if we all think, of course we want to just pass away in our sleep.
That'd be nice.
That would be nice,
Yeah.
but that's not our medical system anymore. So you got to plan for the worst. Yeah. And the more planning, the less painful it is for everyone, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I recognize that it can be difficult to think about those things. I get it. So I was explaining that my view on that is it's an act of love and an act of courage. But it needs to be done. We want you safe and with a high quality of life. Robert, thank you. Thank you for coming and spending time and delivering the news about, the cost part of this. I think people skip over that. They think that something's going to happen and it's just going to be doable. And the answer is, well, maybe, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I really care about seniors. I made that my life's work. I got my education in that field. There are a lot of good people out there that really want to provide quality care, but you still need to do your homework. And so I appreciate it. You call Mark, get my number. I'm happy to talk to you and help give any advice that I could.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Mark, how much time? Are we good? Is it time to quit? It's time to quit. Bio break. See you in 15.